Welcome to today's DMAI Event Impact Calculator demo of the Festivals and Cultural Events module. My name is Elaine Rosquist. I'm the Director of Client Services for the calculator, and I'm joined today by, or with, I should say, Adam Sachs, who's the President of Tourism Economics. Hi, Adam. Welcome.
Thanks, Elaine. Hi, everybody.
Great. Just a little bit of housekeeping before I turn it over to Adam. We are recording today's session. We will also be accepting any questions. We'll address those at the end. So please, as you're thinking of things, type them right in. I'll be watching that board during and helping you with some of those, and then we'll address those or direct those to Adam at the end of the presentation. So thank you for your time, and I will send this PowerPoint out as well to everyone later this afternoon, so you don't have to type it all up. Thanks, Adam.
Great. Well, thanks, Elaine. Thanks, everybody, for taking time today. What we're going to do is first review at a high level what the Festivals and Cultural Events module encompasses, and then we'll from there move to a demonstration of the actual platform. My hope is to get through that in maybe about 20 to 25 minutes, and then have time for questions. So, as Elaine said, feel free to put those into the dialog box and go to meetings, and then we'll make our way through those at the end. All right, so just as a quick overview, right now the Event Impact Calculator it recently had its 5th birthday, and since then we've reached up to 174 DMOs that are using the platform, and it currently includes what it was originally launched to be, which is the Meetings Calculator, including conventions, trade shows, and business meetings, and then the Sports module, which was added 2 years ago. And you can see there the breakdown, where about 2/3 of users get both the Sports and the Meetings modules, and then about 1/4 get the Meetings module only, and just 8% get the Sports module only. What's pretty remarkable is that over this period of time, it's now pushing toward 90,000 events that have been analyzed on the platform. But since we launched the calculator initially, we've had pretty consistent requests for the ability to measure the economic impact of festivals and cultural events, recognizing that they are different from all of these other event types. So why has this been launched? As I mentioned, they are indeed, these sorts of events are very different. They have unique visitor profiles, unique spending and activity patterns. The party size, the length of stay also differs quite a bit from some of these other event types. The other reason that I think that we've gotten so many requests over the years is that festivals and cultural events do generate significant economic impacts, and they're really important to the DMO community and, of course, the economies that you all represent. It also bears mentioning that these sorts of events require particular kinds of investments, whether they be incentives or co-marketing, infrastructure investments and setup, or public services to be provided in order for these events to be hosted. All of these things cost money, so in order to really ensure that these investments are worthwhile, knowing the economic impact is very, very important. To start, we want to define what we're even talking about. The whole concept of festivals and cultural events is quite broad, and you can see just the diversity of possibilities within this category: parades, art exhibits, concerts, fairs, festivals, award ceremonies, and theater. So what do they hold in common? I think the one thing that we want to identify is that each of these events, in order to be considered as within the economic impact platform, the event impact calculator, they have to draw out-of-town visitors, and so that would differentiate between an event that may be primarily a local fair and then something that is truly drawing people from out of town, and that's really where we want to focus in terms of certainly where DMOs tend to focus, but also the way that the calculator is geared. To give you some examples of how indeed diverse event types can be, here's just a handful of events that would fall into these categories that Los Angeles hosts every year. And of course, these are very well-known national and international events. But in contrast, and just as relevant to the calculator, is events that Knoxville, Tennessee hosts on a regular basis. Arts festivals, music festivals, and even the International Biscuit Festival, which generates significant economic impact. So we've got to be able to have something that can deal with these differences, and so it's clearly not a one-size-fits-all in terms of what a festival or cultural event represents. Just a few other examples to broaden out our view here: Mardi Gras, the Christmas Boat Parade in Newport Beach, jazz festivals, state fairs, even a kite festival. So we're talking about a pretty broad group of possibilities here. Some distinctions. What would not be considered for analysis within the event impact calculator would be a concert tour. So if an artist is touring the country and is going to various stops around the country, well, it's likely that's going to be drawing primarily locals, since it's going to be touring across the country. The same would be true of a local fair. But in contrast, particularly on the concert front, you can see some events that are really national draw because they're unique to the destination. And these are primarily the ones that I have here are within the Palm Springs jurisdiction, but also Lollapalooza, which is an annual event that has a significant national draw. To give you a sense of how important these events can be, music festivals in Palm Springs, just 5 of them together generate $805 million. Summerfest, an annual festival in Milwaukee, we estimate generated $227,000 just last year. The Virginia Arts Festival, it's about $17 million. The Mardi Gras Parade, not in New Orleans, but in Shreveport, generated $10 million recently. And then the boat parade I mentioned in Newport Beach is a $4 million infusion of economic impact from spending from outside of Newport Beach. So let me walk you through the steps that we've taken in building this, because one of the things we want to do is give you a sense for what's behind the models and the data sets as well as the methodology, so that when you use the platform, you'll have assurance that there's a significant amount of research that's gone behind this. All of this will be documented in the source materials as well that you can reference. The first thing that we did last year was, I guess it was early this year, we organized a task force to provide input on the new module. We had done the same thing for the sports module. It was incredibly useful to get input from a group of DMO leaders that will be using it to make sure that what we come out with in the end is aligned with your needs, as well as aligned with what's possible in terms of data inputs. So we surveyed the task force to start on the type of events that they'd want to analyze, what inputs do they have, what would be possible to acquire. We don't want to create a platform that's difficult to use because the inputs are out of reach. So what we did in convening the task force is we allowed those members have input based on the past research and available data into the parameters of the calculator. Just a shout out to the members of the task force from Los Angeles, Lincoln City, Knoxville, Columbia, Shreveport, Raleigh, Newport Beach, Myrtle Beach, and Destination DC. All these folks contributed significantly to where we are to be able to launch the calculator now. So from there, we moved into development, and the key step there was to build the data set across different event types, and that was pulled together from a variety of sources, including academic literature. The Americans for the Arts runs periodic surveys of visitor spending at a host of different events, which is very useful. A number of studies have been funded by DMOs individually, which we compiled as well, and then our own analysis of a host of events that we've measured the economic impact for over the years. So this compiled about 35 events just in terms of DMO funded. The Americans for the Arts, I think, is actually several hundred additional events that we analyzed there. And then we moved to national survey data, and for that we purchased data from Longwoods International, who runs a syndicated traveler survey in the U.S., a sample of about 500,000 each year. And from that we just filtered it for those that had attended a fair or festival. And that gives us average spending per day in each of the major categories for travelers who attend a festival or fair. You can see for an overnight visitor about in the $75 range, for a day visitor in the low 60s. When we compared the Longwoods data to the individual event data, we saw some really encouraging results, that despite some of the diversity, and now you can see the average spending per day differs quite a lot across different event types, the average actually matched the Longwoods data. So coming at it from two different perspectives, two different streams of research, we came out with the same spending average on per person per day spending. From the events, we also looked at what percentage of attendees are actually visitors. And this connects back to what I mentioned earlier, in that we only want to count the economic impact of people that are coming in from out of town. And what we see here is a wide range of the percentage of attendees to festivals and cultural events that are coming from out of town, anywhere from 25% up to about 90%. And so the calculator needs then to be flexible to reflect these differing visitor shares. By the same token, and not surprisingly, the share of visitors that are spending the night also is quite diverse, ranging from about 10% up to 80%. The average is around 30%. And this helps to set the parameters, as well as how we enable the user to identify where their event falls within this continuum. The next step was to regionalize the survey data. I think for those of you that already use the Event Impact Calculator, you know that each of the 174 users of the calculator has a model that is unique to their destination. And so one of the things we need to do is move from that national level analysis down to city level analysis, because we all know that the per diem spending levels and the economic impact will vary based on the location. And so here is Longwoods data that we've broken into city tier, or the size of city, and not surprisingly, the larger cities tend to yield a higher spending per day average than the medium and smaller size cities. One of the things that we noted, and is reflected in the calculations, is that for festivals and cultural events, there isn't a significant difference in spending averages as you move across city sizes. In fact, there's the difference between the smallest of cities and the largest of cities is only about a 10% gap there. But you can see it's quite larger for a business meeting or a convention, and that kind of is reasonable when you think about a convention in a major large city and how expensive that would be versus a convention in a smaller city. But a fair or festival cultural event, that's going to be a little bit more homogeneous, regardless of whether it's in a tier 1, a tier 2, or a tier 3 city. The last step in terms of the data analysis is to localize the information all the way down to the city level. And whereas the step 4 is to get it to the regional level, that is size of city, the final step is to get it to the individual city level for all users. And for that, we use Bureau of Labor Statistics data at the county level that gives us the average wage per employee by industry. And that helps us scale all of those regional data down to the individual county level. And so not surprisingly, as an example, wage per employee in accommodations food services is highest in New York City, but you can see it's in the middle in terms of LA, San Diego, Palm Beach, and then relatively less expensive in Allegheny County, Pittsburgh. The last step from there is to build the impact model itself, and that takes all of the spending results and translates them into the key metrics that come out of the model. Those are production, jobs, wages, and taxes. And You're probably aware that we measure each of those on a direct, indirect, and induced basis. That is, how many jobs are created in the restaurants, hotels, and venues, transportation companies, retail shops, etc., directly, but then also what are the jobs and taxes and wages generated through the supply chain, and what are the same that are generated as employees who earn income as a result of the event spend that income in the local economy. That would be the induced impact. So we get the full economic impact of the event in each of these measurements. That really concludes the modeling part of the work, and what remained at that point was to finalize the interface, and we're in the process of just testing and making some tweaks to the interface now. There are three minimum inputs that are required for a user to run an impact in the FCE module. The first is the dates of the events, the start and the end date. The second is the attendance. And then the third is the average ticket price, if there is a ticket, if it is a gated event. Now there's some unique characteristics of this module that we want to take into account in the calculation. And they're unique from sports, they're unique to sports, they're unique to conventions and trade shows. The first is that because of the diversity of different events within this category of fairs or festivals and cultural events, we've split them into 5 different types of events. They're shown here: performing arts, visual arts, film, food and drink, and then cultural, religious, or identity-based events. So one of the steps from the user experience is to select one of these event types. And then the second is that you'll also want to define the visitor reach, and you'll have a choice in the module whether this event is a primarily local visitor draw or balanced or primarily out of town. And that will place the event on that continuum we saw earlier, where we saw events ranging from anywhere from 20% up to 90% out of town visitors. But the user only needs to choose one of these 3 categories for visitor reach. And then the last item that the user will need to select is where, if there are artists, that is, particularly if we're talking about performing arts, visual arts, and there are significant ticket fees going to pay for those artists, the model needs to know this information. Is the artist are the artists primarily local? Is their location balanced, or are they primarily coming in from out of town? And so you can imagine why that's important if you think of the, some of the major music festivals, where you may have $10 million in ticket sales, but a significant share of that is going to artists that are coming in from out of town. And so we want to know that so that we don't count spending that really is going right through and out of the local economy. So these are just 3 selection points that the user will be required to make in order to run an impact. The basic functionality is to enter those 3 parameters to select these 3 categories as well. Then a report is generated. You can save, recall, aggregate events, and of course the event impact calculator can link to your CRM as well. The same support resources that have been available for the other modules are also available for festivals and cultural events. The user guide and glossary of terms, various online guides, and a helpline. So with that, what I'd like to do is just jump right over to the platform itself, show this to you, and then we'll take some time for questions. So what I'll do is create a fictitious event here, and this will be the DMAI Music Festival. I don't think this is an area that DMAI is considering getting into, but we'll analyze it anyway. And DMAI would, of course, be the hosting organization. We can put it in any city that we want because I'm logged in as an administrator, but you would only have access to your city. We'll go ahead and put it in Austin. Seems like a good place to put it. And we'll give it a start date of the 26th through the 29th of next week. Then this would indeed be a performing arts. You can see we have the choice of visual arts, film, food, and drink, but we'll stick with performing arts here. And then the meeting space, of course, would be outside of a hotel, so you're not going to get a discounted rate on that the way that you would do if you also had the room block. And then we'll go ahead and say this is going to attract 5,000 overnight attendees. You have the option of putting day attendees. We'll go ahead and put in, let's say, just 200. And of those, the local share, we'll just say 50%. So only 100 of these day visitors get counted in terms of their economic impact because half of them are locals. We'll leave room block blank. We'll put in a room rate of $150, and we're ready to go. We'll save and calculate. And we have a 2-page report that appears on the screen that you can also download into Excel or into a Word document. And this gives us the key parameters of, that we put into the event, as well as the key results here on the top. This will generate direct business sales of about $3 million and a total economic impact of $5 million. Okay. Taxes generated $451,000, and a net direct tax that does not include the indirect and induced impacts is $355,000. And we would estimate that the event will generate 10,000 room nights. That visitor spending, or all of the spending that the event generates, is grouped into 3 categories: attendees, organizer, and the media, so their respective spending. But it's also organized by what industries that spending is taking place in. So lodging is picking up the majority of the spending, followed by restaurants, and then retail, looks like transportation third. And then that data is shown here in the table below, both shown down the rows by industry and across the columns by who is spending the money, but equaling that 2.9 million in direct spending. The second page gives us a little bit more detail on the economic impact in terms of not only business sales, but personal income. That is what households are receiving, jobs supported, and then taxes. You can see that these are broken out between direct and then the aggregate of indirect and induced impacts. And the jobs supported are divided between persons, that would be within the 3-day duration of the event, how many people are employed, but also on a full-time equivalent basis. If we were to average that out over a full work year, how many jobs would that support? Taxes are then broken out between federal, state, and local, with detail by tax type for both state and local taxes. The calculator, similar to other modules, can calculate the return on investment of the event. And that's only relevant if you enter in the hosting costs of the event. So what I'll do is I'm going to go back here, and we're going to say that here on hosting costs, the second tab, that it did require a cash incentive of $50,000 to host the event. So we save and calculate. Now we have an input there on which to calculate ROI. And we'll go to the second page and we'll look at that ROI calculation. So whereas $355,000 were generated in taxes, it cost the DMO, or the destination, $50,000 to host the event, meaning this is a pretty good investment. It is a net ROI of $305,000, just the difference of these two, and a percentage return on investment of over 600%. And as we saw on the first page, 10,000 some room nights, peak room nights of over 2,500, and then total visitor days of 20,000. So this can be exported to any of these documents. We can also go back into a save calculation and look this up and pull out the data, aggregate it with other events as needed. So what I'm happy to do is stop here and take time for questions, if there are any.
Great, Adam. Thank you. Let me see. Yes, we have a few questions that have come in. Let's just start with if you can define what event type, say, and they gave an example, would consumer shows fall under, and the example given was like Lego Fest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, provided that the show is drawing visitors from out of town, then you could align it with one of these categories. Would probably put it into visual arts in that case. The reason is because one of the distinctives of a visual arts event is that there is a sale of merchandise. So in many cases, and that would certainly be the case for a Lego convention as well. But we want to be careful when it comes to consumer shows that they do, that you do have a sense for what percentage of visitors are coming in from out of town.
That's helpful, Adam, because there are a number of questions that are coming in asking that, helping to identify how are CVBs and festival organizers identifying who are the visitors to the community, since events like this don't often have room blocks.
Right.
So that question is coming in a variety of different ways, if you want to kind of address that, yeah.
Right. And
average overnight stay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it comes down to this set of criteria in the model, and it's in the back end, but not in the front end right now. But one of the things that you'll be able to select between is the visitor reach, and if you select primarily local visitors, it will put the event in the range of about 15% out of town and 85% local. Balance will be 50-50. Then primarily out of town will be the flip side of that, with about 85% out of town, 15% local. You can adjust those shares, but those are the default shares based on the research that we've done. How you can better inform those model defaults include any information that you can get from the meeting organizer or the host, and that can include ticket data, which is often can be defined by zip code, or other market data that they may have on their customer base. But what this does is it gives you the ability to run an impact, even if you don't know what that exact share is. If you can take the event and assign at least one of these 3 characteristics to it, then the model will run effectively and give you what would be the industry average in each of those 3 categories.
Great. Thank you, Adam. I'm just trying to group some of these questions. And we will have a glossary, because I know that came up. There will be information and detailed information on all of this, as it lives already in the tool when you're on the actual website for the Event Impact Calculator. Someone asked about a distinction on the full-time FTEs and the persons under jobs supported.
Yeah.
If you can define that. Thanks, Adam.
Let me pull that up so we can reference actual data. The first thing to note is that we're real careful here to use the word supported in contrast to, say, generated, because these are jobs that I think it's important to recognize are jobs that in most cases already exist, but they're being supported during the event itself. And so what this 874 jobs implies is that when you take all of the different staff of this event, from beginning to end, there are 874 people that are going to be involved in pulling this event off. What the 29 people does is basically takes this number and divides it by the number of workdays in the year to create a full-time equivalent calculation. So 874 people employed over a 3-day event is the equivalent of 29 people employed for an entire year. within those same occupations.
Great. Thank you, Adam. Can you, we had a question about another example. Could restaurant week, for example, be calculated?
It could be, right? And I think there, again, it comes down to making decisions about where that would fall within the continuum of draw of visitors. It's very likely that restaurant week is going to fall within this category of primarily local. But what the calculator do will measure the economic impact of out-of-town visitors on restaurant week. You can always trick the calculator into doing what you want, right? If you want to measure everyone, regardless of whether they're out of town or local, you can note that the event is primarily an out of town draw. But our guidance on it is that the EIC is designed to measure the impact of out of town visitors, whether they stay the night or not, because that generally speaking is going to align with the DMO mandate to market the destination for visitors.
Great. Okay, so we now have just a few more questions. What strategy do you use when an event fills rooms destination-wide to determine ADR?
Mm-hmm. In that case, what we recommend is to use your STAR report ADR for that point in the year. What your what is the that seasonal ADR that you're experiencing. You can, of course, you can adjust that if you know that it's going to be shifting toward a particular chain scale more than the average of your community. But that tends to be the safest way to do it if you don't have an agreed room block rate.
Great. Okay. And then, what is the difference in impact from non-ticketed events on average spending?
Mm-hmm. The non-ticketed events will default to recreation spending being along the average of festivals and cultural events. Once we introduce a ticket, that will add to that recreation category, and so it tends to yield to a ticketed event that whatever we calculate as the ticket revenue will be added to all of the other visitor spending. So you want to bear that in mind when you enter in the average ticket price.
Okay, and one more question, and you addressed this early on, but how do you define, or is that will be in the glossary, that constitutes the tier 1, 2, 3 cities in this case?
Yeah, well, fortunately, you don't need to worry about that because by the time we've finalized the model for you, it's not on the basis of tiers, it's on the basis of your city. So it's actually localized to at the county level to the city that you represent. So the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 is something we've defined based on size of city. I believe it's done actually just on population for the sake of simplicity, but it gives us anchors within the modeling process as we move from national to regional and then to individual local DMO analysis.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I don't see any other very specific questions here. I do want to mention a few more housekeeping items that I did not mention earlier, and I'll send immediately following this Adam's presentation links to order forms and all sorts of good things. We are asking that if you want to be in the release of October 3rd, we receive your registration form by this Friday, the 23rd of September. We start all subscriptions on a monthly basis, so to be in the October 1 group, which actually will not pay for October, will just pay for starting November 1, we would like to see that order form by this Friday. That is all I can think of for now, Adam. When I send that, I'll be copying Adam, so Certainly, if you think of more questions, just send the note back to me. I'll get it on to Adam. We'll connect you guys. We want to make sure that you had everything addressed through this. So that'll be about all for today, Adam, but I appreciate your time. And if there's anything last items you want to address.
No, thanks, Elaine, and we are happy to answer any questions as they come up.
Wonderful. Have a great afternoon, everyone, and thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.